Friends, first I would like to tell you that I came here in the middle of a big personal crisis because my mother was critically ill and still she is, and I didn't have the slightest time to reflect on what I'm going to say. Until the plane took off, I was not sure whether I was coming. So I did not write the paper as such. I did prepare myself last night and this morning, but even what I had written down, I left everything aside after listening to Amina and after listening to the discussion this morning. Let me begin by noting my appreciation of the reflections on the 1971 war. I think all of us wept, and I also could not control my tears. And in addition to that, this reflection reminded me very, very strongly of what has been going on in Sri Lanka for the last 18 years. The ethnic conflict, which has by now killed more than 50,000 people, most of them are youth, and raped women, mostly Tamil women, and placed more than 500,000 people in refugee camps, disrupted the lives, education and future of whole generation of young people. So, like most of you, I also carry this enormous agony and also so many other problems that my country, not my country even, but I can also see that this is in a wider context, in the context of this whole South Asian region, that we are all the same when it comes to many of the issues that we are talking about. Now, when we talk of war, the war in Sri Lanka that has been going on for 2 decades has also established quite strongly a war economy. The war is made to be perhaps the only hope for the poor, for youth, for particularly the rural youth, among whom unemployment is a very severe problem. Joining the army is the only hope of a job. That has been made so the government, this government or any of the previous governments did not have to think of any employment plans, because the war is there. The war needs soldiers. So there are sons and also lately the daughters of mainly the poor rural people. And for men, for the last 2 decades, this has been primarily the only source of employment. And now more and more women, more and more young women are also being recruited to the army. I used to work some time ago at the Center for International Studies, where I used to meet some of these brigadiers and colonels and so on, and also some of the high-rank army officers who used to train the soldiers. I met two professors of education who had joined the Kotalawala Defence Academy, and they spoke to me of their bitterness and of their decision to leave the academy. And they told me how the youth who joined the academy, how they have been indoctrinated, how they have been brainwashed, how they are being completely formed into different people. Because most of these come from rural areas. They are, I think, some sort of mild and soft characters. They are also not being rural and being not sophisticated. They are not subjected to many of these gender constructions that we talk about. They are still very raw youth. So these people, these youth, are given the kind of training which sort of brutalizes them. Even for instance, how you perceive a woman, how you perceive a Tamil woman when you go to the north and east. All these ideas about being Sinhala, and the ability to kill, the ability to destroy, the need is all things have been generated in these people, and the two professors actually they could no longer take it up. So they decided to leave, and they also left Sri Lanka. So this made me reflect. We are very critical of the army, but we also have to remember that they are also human beings. It doesn't mean that I am going to say that, I justify all these brutalities and all these killings and all that, but who wants this? Who are the people who need this? Who make this decision? And who benefit by these things? These are the questions that I think we have to ask.
Only the Sinhalese youth are taken to the army?
In recent years, there were Tamil and Muslims in the army, but in recent years, the government made the deliberate decision not to take the Tamil to the army. So it's now vastly a Sinhala army, because it's the army fights with the Tamils. So I think they also have this dilemma. They are suspicious about having Tamils in the army. So it's at the moment it's mainly a Sinhala army. And also now the Sinhala nationalists who have emerged in the recent years with lots of money, they patronize the army. And can we forget this very the very same Sinhala army in 1970, 71, and again in a much more brutal manner in 1988, 87, 88, 89, the very same Sinhala army went and devastated the whole population, a whole generation of youth. According to Amnesty International, more than 65,000 youth disappeared, and the brutality is committed. There was tire fire everywhere. I can't think of a place where there was no tire fire, where the youth were not burnt in tires. So, isn't this the same army? Now, delegated the task of protecting the nation, mainly the Sinhala nation. The war has also caused the disruption of families. There are 65,000 war widows, and we pay considerable proportion. The defense levy is increased now to 7.5%. The government also has, in the past years, has gradually decreased the budget on education and health. And this has a direct impact on women because Sri Lanka is also quite well known as a country for its quite significant educational attainment of women. And actually now we also notice that the educational, not only the money has been reduced, but the education standard. The standard is also going down very rapidly. And the literacy rates are not the same. And the school dropout rates are also becoming very high. And in the war zone and also in the border villages, the children, they drop out from schools because the schools cannot be conducted, schools cannot be run, and the children can't go to school. So this situation has created very serious problems for the entire population, particularly for the north and east, where the livelihood of the people completely disrupted. I would also like to go beyond from the discussion and from what Amina said this morning about the nation state. Now, if we look at the history of Sri Lanka during the last 53 years after 1948, what is the position of the so-called nation state? Particularly, what is the position of the state? Or importantly, what is the position of the government? Can the government decide? Now it's an elected government for whatever it can be. I mean, there is a lot of corruption in the elections. They are no longer free and fair elections. For whatever it is, at least to a certain extent, it is elected by popular vote. But then what can the government decide? The present government, which, when in opposition, was a spokesman against the World Bank and the IMF. And they came on a platform to introduce very progressive economic reforms when they were in opposition. Now, are they now in a position to fulfill the promises that they gave? Because every decision that they make doesn't come from their plan or their policies. What is they implement, what is being dictated to them by the IMF and the World Bank. So this is the position of Sri Lanka. What is the agricultural policy in Sri Lanka? Now, agriculture is very important, at least when we look at it from women's point of view, because majority of our women, I think more than 60% of the women population, they are active in agriculture, and their contribution to agriculture is so crucial. And the small farmers, they are the people who feed us. We have about 8 million of small farmers, and out of this number, about 80% are women. And what is our agricultural policy? Our agricultural policy has been formulated by the World Bank, and the World Bank sees the small farmer as the biggest obstacle to agricultural development. So the government has taken it up from them, and what the government did during the last few years, I mean, it speaks so much about the authority of the government and what they want to do and what it means for men and women. Now we have our potato cultivation and vegetable cultivation, which is done by small scale farmers, and exactly when the harvest is out, under free trade agreements, the market is inundated, markets are flooded with imports from India, from Holland, from America, from whatnot. And the farmers, they can't sell any of their produce. So we have this phenomenon in Sri Lanka. The farmers, in huge numbers, in hundreds, committing suicide. In the north central province, in various farmers where the agriculture and where these cultivation flourished, they have taken loans from banks, and then they find they can't sell their produce. So there is no other way. There is no one to talk to. So hundreds and thousands of farmers are committing suicide in Sri Lanka. So this makes us actually question the sanction or the capacity or the power of the so-called national government. And the now Asian Development Bank, I saw recently one of the reports, the Asian Development Bank says Sri Lankan people, the Sri Lankan parents are very keen to educate their young daughters and sons, and they want to send them to their higher institutes of education. And why don't you, means the government, why don't you charge a fee for higher education from the universities? That means a very huge income if we charge a fee for higher education. So the government now is willy-nilly, they want to implement these things, but there is also tremendous opposition from the people because the government can't speak of this. There is already mounting opposition, and now the water issue is there in a big way. Again has come from the International Irrigation Management Institute under the patronage of the World Bank, which has come up with water entitlement, some sort of manipulation, where the people also have to register the well which provides drinking water, where they have to pay a tax. So where is the national government? What is the authority of the national government? Actually,
you have a well at home, you have to pay tax.
this is, the government denies it. They are going to introduce. That is, you have to register, you have to get the license. So to get the license, you have to pay money. And once you register the well, everybody has access to the well. There will be meters fixed. There will be meters fixed on irrigation canals, and the farmers also have to pay water tax. And I would, from this, I would like to also go on to democracy. Actually, this democracy being constructed as a majoritarian, the rule of the majority, I think it's a very evil concept. I think the feminist movement for the last 30 years has communicated something very, very important to the world, to the politicians and to the intellectuals and to the media, about the meaning of democracy. The feminist movement has said and says that democracy is nothing but a principle which guides social relations between individuals in our daily lives. That is what democracy is all about. It's a system of value to be practiced in our daily life. But democracy at its practice is a majoritarian rule, and it in the final analysis like the nation state, it is this form of democracy which has in Sri Lanka partly, which has created this ethnic conflict. Coupled with the open economy introduced in 1977 and all those things of various forms of discrimination meted out on the Tamil community since 1948. So democracy, I think, we have to tell loudly to the world as a women's movement what democracy is all about. And the power, the concept of power is power as it is used today by not only by the government or the politicians and also by the democracy, by the bureaucracy. It is an oppressive instrument. When you are in a decision making position or whatever other means that give you a position of power, it's being used by people to oppress others. That power should be actually something that you should share. Power should be used to share the limited resources on a basis of equality with others. It is how it should be. And I think as feminists, this concept of power and this concept of democracy, we have to take to the family. We have to build democracy in the family, in our day-to-day relations. How do we build up relations from our small days within the family? I have this experience of talking to school children about some of these issues about women's rights and human rights and violence against women. And I had so much experiences, how the school boys reacted to what we said. Now we saw during our sessions with the school children, the school boys, they are within the age group of 14 and 17 years. By that time they had learned everything. All the evil concepts about women. They also see school girls as their private property. And they asked many times, they sent us small chits, small pieces of paper in which they wrote, women are responsible for violence against them. Why do you want to wear short skirts with the slit? Aren't you provoking men? That type of questions all the time in all the schools. We had these same questions repeatedly sent to us. So we saw during these programs how this process of the socialization and how these constructions are being absorbed by the school children and how they grow up with these things. So that is why we have to take the principles of democracy from the family to the school. And without doing that, we expect democracy from top. We expect democracy from the government. And who elects government? Those people who vote, are they democratic? Those people who vote in the elections which are marked by nothing but violence, are they democratic? So we, without addressing all these issues on the ground, we have this idea of democracy coming from top. So I don't think that I should I have raised some of the issues that I wanted to raise. And I think some of the basic concepts in Sri Lanka, some of the basic concepts about women, I would like to add some of the basic concepts are always there when we think of our recorded history. By that time women were already in a subordinate position. And after that, we had the Manu Dharmartha inductions coming from India, then the Victorian values and Victorian values coming from the British imperialism and the colonial powers, and various other concepts being institutionalized into the social fabric. And these concepts and these constructions still continue. There are so many things like the concept of the household, the male household, the women, perception of women as non-worker, the attitude to sex and sexuality, and the caste system, and also issues regarding land ownership. Now, actually for the first time, some of these concepts have been challenged by the women's movement. And if you take the Sri Lankan history, actually, some of the constructions were first challenged by the Tamil Youth Congress in the 1930s. So I think all of us, we have to do a lot of work. We have to take our work, I think, to the grassroots, to the majority of women and majority of men. And having said that, I like to also end what I have said.